Welcome to IT Fundamentals Training Series. This is episode 30. Will never be 29 again. We are going to talk about tablets, smartphones, and the difference between that and mobile devices today. So join me as we get rolling. Welcome to the IT Fundamentals Training Series. This is Mark Haupt. I am your host today and always for the training series that we have before us. Hopefully you're getting some value out of this. Today is episode 30, and we are going to talk about tablets and smartphones. So, tablets and smartphones. Here is a smartphone. You can see it is very small. Most of you probably have these, and you might even be utilizing a smartphone to listen to this conversation. Now, let's take a look at a tablet. This is the tablet. It is much larger. In fact, if you set them side by side, you can see the difference in size of these devices right there. And you can probably guess what the difference in purpose is. Well, guess what? You probably don't know the total difference in purposes. So tablets were designed originally to kind of try and replace laptops and move a group of people who were mobile business people onto the tablets and move the other folks onto more desktop environments. That never was a success. That was the original intent, but it was never the success. And so tablets have become more or less reading devices or handheld devices that you can access the internet, you can access online books, music, all sorts of things like that, but a little bit, including movies, but a little bit more from an entertainment perspective. Now, yes, I do use my iPad very frequently as a laptop replacement. In fact, sometimes on some trips that I go on, I do not take my laptop, especially if the only thing I know that I'm going to have time for is to do email, because I do my email on this tablet. Now, this is why, because I have a full set keyboard that's attached to this tablet. And sitting on an airplane or somewhere along that line, plus the weight of that tablet is much easier to utilize and to drag around with you. Now, I find that these smartphones are way too small and to do work on, although I do text back and forth sometimes. So the tablets are kind of that intermediary device when I don't want to haul a 4.5 to 5.5 pound laptop around, but yet I need the resources of the laptop, such as the keyboard and so on and so forth. So the tablets are that. Smartphones are actual telephones, although you can use the tablet as a telephone, especially if you use something like Zoom. I know with my tablet and my phone, which is the Apple devices, the iPad and the iPhone, I could actually take phone calls if my iPhone is in close proximity using near field communications or Bluetooth type of scenario to my tablet. The book aptly states in the third paragraph on page 132 that, hey, why don't we just call all of these devices collectively as mobile devices? Because there's another device out there, or another few devices out there, like this Apple Watch, that actually functions in the same manner. I can take my phone calls on this Apple Watch. There are certain application functions that I can do on this Apple Watch that I can also do on my tablet, and I can do on my smartphone, including reading texts, and if I really wanted to strain my eyes, reading email. So let's just call these things all mobile devices that are out there, and I think that's a great idea. So we've already done a little bit of comparing and contrasting of these mobile devices, but let's take a look at what they want us from the book perspective to look at in regards to these mobile devices. All right, the very first thing they bring up in comparing and contrasting, it's very important to understand that the tablets and the phones are typically not field serviceable. Now, what that means versus a laptop is, with a laptop, I could take my screwdriver out, or I get a technician to come out to my home, unscrew the back end or the front end, wherever the entry point is into the laptop. I can unscrew that. I can then perhaps upgrade my RAM and change out certain cards, perhaps even change out the SSD or hard disk that might be inside of it. You cannot do that with these mobile devices. Everything inside of them is hardwired in, and every case is rock solid sealed. So you have to send it back to the manufacturer. That is the first and foremost compare and contrasting that they do in the book, and that is a very important piece. If your device goes down, if you break the screen and need to get it replaced, you have to take it into a shop, an authorized dealer, somebody to work with it. Now, another compare and contrast they talk about here is the input methods are different. Now, typically your input methods on a mobile device is going to be a touch screen type of scenario, unless you add something like I did to my iPad, where I added the keyboard and I added a stylus pen to it. But typically the input methods on these mobile devices will be your finger, touch screen type of scenario, whereas on a laptop type device, even if you have a touch screen, your input is going to be a keyboard. It's going to be some sort of pointing device, including the possibility you're pointing being your finger. So that's another important difference. The other thing is that memory and storage are handled much differently in this, and I think it's important that you read on 133 this entire chapter, or the entire section of the chapter in here, because memory is dedicated towards the functions and the applications that will be running on this device instead of other types of scenarios. In fact, it says right here in the book, it says instead mobile devices use solid state memory for storage of both apps and data, as well as running on operating systems, and they're maintaining all that storage locally within the machine. So so that's something that you need to make sure that you take a look at when you're communicating. So I think we're all familiar how to use mobile devices, but keep in mind this book was written back in the day when not everybody, well, okay, probably most everybody, but let's just say not everybody had a mobile device and the interfaces that were on those mobile devices. But I think this portion of the chapter is going to be very easy for you to go through because you're so familiar with it. And quite frankly, as I read through this, the only thing that you need to pay attention to in regards to what's here is probably the things that are associated with the mobile device that you don't have. So if you have Apple mobile devices, you want to pay attention to their comments about Android. If you have Android and you're not familiar with the iOS for Apple, you need to pay attention to that. And they do seem to favor the iOS for Apple just a little bit in here, even though they do try and be agnostic. So keep that in mind as well. And then again, on page 136 and 137, very things that are second nature to us these days, working with the mobile devices by tapping, swiping, pinching, and the whole concept of kinetics. Just understand that that's probably a word, I know you use tap, swipe, and pinch all the time. But kinetics is probably a word you're not familiar with that you might see in the exam that you want to take a look at here. It says kinetics refers to the sense of motion. So it's kind of like the tap, swipe, pinch, rub your finger across it, whatever the case may be. But that kinetics is the fancy word for that kind of thing, if you will. All right, moving onwards, they talk about the difference between portrait and landscape mode, and simply put, portrait is the vertical mode up, down, landscape is side to side, and the fact that you could lock them. And it does talk about security in here. And so I want to spend just a moment talking about mobile device security. So these devices are frequently left laying around or even forgotten in different places, or maybe left open. They do not have the security controls on them, such as that might be applied to your laptop that is managed and maintained by a enterprise level security environment. So you need to make sure that when you set the security, you're doing so that will not be convenient, but actually be something that is secure for you to deal with. So, for example, the screen timeout. A lot of people don't like screen timeouts on things like the tablets or the iPhones and so on and so forth. That is probably one of the biggest mistakes, because if you drop that device, if you leave it somewhere, even set it down in a coffee shop for a few minutes and walk away to use the restroom, somebody can get in there and either take the device and walk away with it and change your passwords, or wipe the device and then reuse it somewhere, or just simply get on your apps and act as you. If you've got an app for Amazon, you got an app for this store or that store, get on there and buy things for you, and have them delivered to their house. And that would be a certain challenge. So make sure that you use the security lock features and that you know how to operate those types of things. All right, moving on to page 141, configuring the network connections. Network connections on these types of devices, especially the Wi-Fi scenario, is very easy. Couple taps of a button and underneath general settings, and away you go, and you're connected up. It will ask you for your password and so on and so forth. You can connect through Bluetooth. Just be aware of that. Now, this whole thing, airplane mode. For those of you who don't know, airplane mode was set up so that as you're on an airplane, there was one time a belief that the communication signals from a cell phone could interrupt with the communications and electronics, or avionics, we call them, on board a commercial jetliner. That has proven to be a lot of false, or I wouldn't say false because that would imply that somebody was lying, but that's not the case. The studies that have preceded the original concern do not align with the controls, if you will, or the requests that were put in place. So airplane mode was put in there so that when you swipe airplane mode, basically all of your connections become disconnected. Your cell phone, your near field communications, your Wi-Fi, all that kind of stuff. Anything that's emanating from the device will be shut down. You can still use the device without turning it off. You can still use the device if there was a localized app that's on it. Now, personally, I haven't used the airplane mode in a long time, but every now and then I will use the airplane mode whenever I go into an area that I have security concern about. So you could use airplane mode as a security function where you don't have to turn the device off, but you can turn all the emanating computing network connection capabilities off and maintain some control over the system there. All right. Moving on to page 148 and 49, I told you this is going to be an easy chapter for a lot of you because you're so used to using these smartphones. Please read them. Don't skim over them. Please read them so you can pick things up. But we're now moving into getting the apps and synchronizing. You know how to get on the App Store. You know how to use your apps and download them, and what the purpose of those are there. All right, so that's where we're going to end up today at page 155 with episode 31. We'll pick up with gaming consoles next. But again, as always, contact me at mhaupt@commonsensesecurity.net. You could text me at 217-314-9339. Let me know how you're doing in this. Let me know where you're struggling, where you're having problems with it, where I can help with. But more importantly, as I indicated in episode 29, I am looking at offering some new opportunities and some new services, a new product, if you will. Nothing's being sold, don't get me wrong, but just some new ways for you to learn this material in group setting type of scenarios. But I need to know there's people out there actually using it, because right now I'm not seeing that there's a terrible number of people that are using it. So let me know how it's going, and we will talk to you later.